Well, let me introduce the first speaker, and then later I'll introduce our second one. Our first is Lee Weingart, sitting right next to me. And Mr. Weingart is founder and president of LNE Group, a leading professional services firm specializing in strategic advocacy and lobbying solutions for clients in the public and private sector. Since early 2002, Mr. Weingart has cultivated his self-started two-person business into what is now one of the top advocacy and lobbying firms in Ohio. Headquartered in Cleveland, the firm has expanded to better serve clients with offices in Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, and Washington. Mr. Weingart has an experienced team of professionals working for his firm. He also has political experience, having been elected at the age of 28, I think a record in this area, to the Cuyahoga County Commission. And that was in 95 to 97. One of the youngest people ever to serve as a county commissioner. And he holds a Juris Doctorate degree from George Washington University National Law Center, which he received in 1991. Received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Economics and Management from DePaul University in 1988. And I'm delighted to have him back because he was our featured speaker along with Bob Dykes last election, 2006.
It's good to be here. Well, I'm Lee Weingart, and I'm a lobbyist. I'm the person that John McCain, your mother, and Barack Obama has warned you about. We're the guys who apparently make things very bad in Washington, D.C., but we don't think so. We think lobbyists have a real important role to fill, just like lawyers and accountants and everybody else, professionals. So I come at this from a perspective of somebody who works with the government every day. Democrats or Republicans, doesn't really matter to me. I've written checks just about everywhere I could this year in support of our clients. So whoever wins, I'm interested in. I'm a Republican. I'd like to see John McCain win, I think. But I'll be interested to see how it all turns out, as you will be on November 4th. So that's me. Want to click it? You recognize these two gentlemen, Barack Obama and John McCain, who for the last 2.5 years of running for president of the United States, it's become a very arduous, long, you might say boring, and sometimes process. Expensive, we know that. Barack Obama has broken every record you could ever imagine him breaking, including raising some $100 million, I think, in the last couple of months. And he'll be on tonight for a half hour on prime time, which has got to cost him at least $5 million. So he's not lacking for money. Last thing I heard, he had $72 million in the bank, and McCain had $36 million. So, as you know, he's got a lead, and he's got a lead about 2-1 in the money right now. If I look at the 2004 map, this is the Bush-Kerry election, of course. You'll notice a lot of red states there. Of course, that means Republican one. That'd be George Bush. And some blue states. Not as many, but they were bigger. Just not quite big enough. Bush got 286 votes. He carries 252. It was a little bit bigger spread than the 2000 race between George Bush and Al Gore. A little more comfortable, not much more. But the one that mattered the most is the one you're sitting in right now, Ohio. Without Ohio, Bush's 286 becomes 266, which, as you know, is 4 short of what you need to be elected president of the United States. You need 270 to win when there's 538 votes in electoral college. So that was the map 4 years ago. What's happened in the last 4 years? The Republican, not very much good has happened. Look at the mood of the country. The red is the wrong track line. The blue is the right direction line. Back in 2005, they were just about even, 48 and 47. Today, 83%, 8 out of 10 say we're going in the wrong direction as a country. 12% say it's the right direction. That's the biggest spread as I've ever seen. Bob may have seen a bigger spread, but it's as wide a spread between the pessimists and the optimists in America I've ever seen. Next slide, please. So as you might guess, George Bush's approval ratings are way, way down. Back at the beginning of 2005, if he was reelected in November, he was right about 50-50. The red line for him is the bad line. That's going up. The blue line for him is the good line. That's going down. So you can see today, more than 2-1, America disapproves of the job that George Bush is doing. The good news for Republicans is Congress is even worse. Look at that. 78% disapprove of the way Congress is handling its job. 13% approve. So it seems like no politicians are very well liked these days in Washington, D.C., not the president nor members of Congress. Next slide. So what's important to people? The economy is number one, as it was back in 1992 when Bill Clinton was elected president. It has eclipsed Iraq by quite a bit. 54% of Americans rate the economy, mortgages, credit crunch, all those things, gas prices as number one. Foreign affairs way down at 12%. It's a big change from 2006, just 2 years ago. What's the bad news for Republicans? Democratic enthusiastic turnout in the primaries. In the 2004 primary, Republicans, in the 2008 primary, you see the increase for Republicans and Democrats. Republicans, 8%, Democrats, 30%. Among young voters, it's 192% increase for Democrats. So who's motivated these days to come out and vote? Democrats. Who is voting early right now in Ohio and Florida and everywhere else? Democrats. If you go to the Board of Elections in Cleveland, you see a lot of folks voting. Very few are Republicans. So the early vote, I've got to believe, favors Barack Obama. Okay, so what's left for 2008? What are the key states to look at? You guys have seen this probably on CNN and Fox and RicklerPolitics.com, but there's 11 states that are feasibly in play. All those states except for Pennsylvania and New Hampshire were won by Bush in 2004. So if you look at Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Missouri, Indiana, Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida were all red states in 2004. So John McCain's got to take his limited resources and campaign in states that Bush won, in some cases pretty comfortably, in 2004. Now, they're campaigning hard in Pennsylvania. The polling that I've seen doesn't really justify that at all. We'll talk about it in a moment. But I show Pennsylvania 10 to 12 points in Barack Obama's column. So I'm sure that the strategy is that they can get a blue state, Pennsylvania, into the red column. They could give up and lose New Mexico, Colorado, Nevada, which I think is probably going to happen. I think New Mexico and Colorado almost assuredly will go with the Barack Obama. Nevada is probably still a little more in play, but it's not too many votes. So let's talk about those states. So here's the 11 states up for grabs. The blue right here is, so these are the states that Barack Obama's got in his column for sure. These are assured Obama. 163 votes over here, assured for McCain. So there are 143 votes in place right now. So if you hit it, so if Barack Obama wins Colorado, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, New Mexico, he has how many votes? 271. How many do you need? 270. He wins by one. So the old myth of winning Ohio to the White House could be just a myth. I think he's got a very good shot of winning Pennsylvania, up by 10 or 12 points right now. New Hampshire, I think, is in this column. New Mexico is trending that way. Democrats are winning the governor's race and some other races in the last couple of years. And Colorado. Did you hit it again for me? What if Colorado jumps over to the other side, the Republican side? Well, then McCain wins, assuming he can get Virginia, Missouri, Indiana, North Carolina, Florida, Nevada, and Ohio as well. So the swing state may actually be the 9 votes in Colorado. That might be the one that makes a difference. So I really think Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, New Mexico are going to go with Obama. I think there's a pretty good shot that McCain will win Indiana, North Carolina, Florida, Nevada, Missouri, Virginia, and Ohio. Oh, and then if he runs the table, if he gets all the 11 states that are in play, he has 366 votes, which is a landslide in the modern-day American politics. So the battleground states. As of this morning, this is the polling that I've seen, the calls that I've made, you can argue that they are basically tied within the margin of error in Florida, Missouri, North Carolina, and Indiana. Obama's ahead in all the polls, but it's within the margin of error, so we can argue those are all truly in play. He's ahead or leaning pretty heavily in some cases, Nevada, Ohio, Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. And I think, again, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, he's so far ahead there, I would just be shocked, short of some huge misreading of polls, that Obama doesn't win Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. So really, take those off the map. You're playing with those 9 right there. And McCain's got to win every week. All right, Senate elections. Right now, there are 49 Republicans, 49 Democrats, 1 independent, Joe Lieberman from Connecticut, who votes for the Democrats, and 1 socialist. That's his term, not mine. He said, I'm a socialist. Bernie Sanders from Vermont is a socialist senator. He votes for Democrats. So it's actually 51 to 49 right now in the U.S. Senate. 5 Republicans are getting out of D.C. as fast as they can. 1, actually, we'll make it 6. 5 are going by their own choice. 1 may be getting new housing courtesy of the federal government. Senator from Alaska. It's the biggest open seat gap in 50 years. And we'll talk about the seats that are in play here in a moment because they are, by and large, Republican-held seats. So there they are. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think 10 or 12 seats there that are contested. Mary Landrieu in Louisiana for a while was contested because of her lack of performance, I think, on the hurricane issues that they've had the last few years. But she's back in, very likely Democrat wins, will win by, I would guess, 8 to 10 in Louisiana. 2 current Republican seats, New Mexico and Virginia, will absolutely go Democrats. Pete Domenich's retiring. He'll be succeeded by a Democrat. Virginia, John Warner will be succeeded by Mark Warner, no relation, just a really rich Democrat who was the governor for 4 years. So they'll go from 51 to 53, because those 2, I would bet anything you want to bet, those 2 will go to the Democrats. So what's left? I'm sorry, let's go back 1. We have Norm Coleman, the incumbent in Minnesota, running against Al Franken, yes, that's Al Franken. Stuart Smalley, Senator Stuart Smalley, can you imagine that? Alaska, Ted Stevens. North Carolina, Elizabeth Dole and Kay Hagan. Oregon, Gordon Smith. Kentucky, Mitch McConnell, who, as you know, is the minority leader in the Senate. He's the #1 Republican in the Senate, and he's running for his life in Kentucky. In Georgia, Saxby Chambliss, an incumbent. Roger Wicker, who was appointed this year to fill a seat in Mississippi. John Sununu in New Hampshire, and Mark Udall, Bob Schaefer in Colorado. So of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seats that are up right now, if Democrats win 7 of them, they will have 60 seats in the House. But if they had 51, plus the 2 at the bottom here, that's 53, plus 7 of these 9, that gets them to 60. Now why is 60 important? Because 60 you could run the table. You can vote cloture on any attempt by Republicans to filibuster any issue. And there are at least 2 issues. Well, 1 big issue that is on the minds of every business owner in America. It's called card check. It's a way to unionize companies without having a secret ballot. It was tried this year by the Democrats in the House and Senate. It passed the House, got to the Senate, and it died on the filibuster. What it is basically is instead of having secret ballot elections that we've had in America for the last 100 years for unions, you could unionize by just going to someone and saying, would you sign here saying you want to use it? Okay. So if they get 51% of eligible voters in the worker pool to card check, you've got a union. When I've talked to manufacturing companies and associations around the country, the only thing they care about is card check. That's it. Everything else, taxes, foreign currency manipulation, all these other things that are kind of important are not important at all. They are scared to death of card check. So they're scared to death of the Democrats getting 60 seats. Actually, 59, because our inspector in Pennsylvania will vote with Democrats on card check. There's a Republican who voted this year with Democrats in the Senate in favor of the card check rule for union. So they really need 59 with card check. So where will this come from? I think there's a very good chance that Norm Coleman could lose. Ted Stevens will lose. He should lose. He should be in jail. He's a crook. Elizabeth Dole could lose. Gordon Smith probably will lose. Saxby Chambliss could lose. John Sununu will lose, and Mark Udall will win Colorado. So there are really up there another 3 seats that I think will go for sure. Sununu, Gordon Smith, Norm Coleman. So it comes down to, Ted Stevens. It comes down to 3 races to watch on election night. If you care about the U.S. Senate. Minnesota, which is Norm Coleman versus Al Franken. Al Franken's got a 0.7-point lead. That's within the margin of error. That's a tie. Elizabeth Dole against Kay Hagan. I know who Kay Hagan is. I'm not sure it matters who she is. She's a Democrat this year. She's up by 2. And Saxby Chambliss and Jim Martin. Jim Martin, I don't know who he is. Again, doesn't matter. He's a Democrat running in a state where Barack Obama is doing pretty well. So those 3 I would watch. Minnesota, North Carolina, Georgia. The Democrats win 2 of the 3, they got 60. 1 of the 3, they got 59. So pretty good shot. Democrats are going to be 59 or 60 when this is all over and really control the U.S. Senate and the presidency in a big way. Okay. Last one will be about the House elections. As you know, all 435 members are up this year for re-election. Every 2 years they run. The current composition is 236 Democrats, 299 Republicans. There was 1 vacancy with the late Secretary Jones, our very dear friend, who passed away this year, replaced by Marcia Fudge, the mayor of Warrensville Heights, who will be a very good person. So 236 to 199. Some Republicans, incumbents are retiring, mostly Republicans, again, beating the hills as fast as they can to get out of Washington, D.C. This is here just kind of as a joke. Republicans need 19 seats to gain control of the House. No way it's going to happen. I put it up there just for laugh's sake. They won't pick up any seats. My guess is they're going to lose a lot. So there are 223 safe Democratic seats, 161 safe Republican seats, and all the rest are probably in play. That is mostly Republican seats. 38 are in play. 12 Democrat seats. So 50 seats in play. More than 3/4 of those are Republican seats. I would guess the Democrats will pick up at least 20 and maybe 30 seats this year, maybe 35 in the House. When you add that to the 23 they picked up in 2004, it is probably the biggest 2-cycle spread in the history of the country, certainly within my lifetime. Maybe 1974 post-Watergate, but not even then I think the Democrats pick up that many seats. This is an outright rejection of George W. Bush. So there's no other way to put this. It's incredible that John McCain is as close as he is, considering how bad the economy is, how bad things are internationally for the United States, and how much people dislike George Bush. This is a message from America to George Bush. We can't vote against you, but we're going to vote against your party as much as we can. And we're going to vote for a guy we have no idea if he's ready to be president of the United States. No idea. He's been a senator for 3 years. Before he was a state senator, before he was a community organizer. Look at this. So they're willing to take this wild chance on Barack Obama only because of George W. Bush. If Bush were remotely popular, this probably wouldn't be much of a race. I think Barack would lose 55-45. So my last thought is this, Mr. Dykes, there are a couple things to think about for election night. Even though it looks a lot like it's going to be Barack Obama who wins, keep in mind the Bradley Wilder effect, which is that African-American candidates always underperform on the polls. It's Ken Blackwell in Ohio for governor in 2006, Lynn Swan for governor of Pennsylvania in 2006, Harold Ford for Senate in Tennessee in 2006, Michael Steele for Senate in Maryland in 2006. Republicans, Democrats, governors, senators, all statewide, all African-American, all lost by at least more than 5 points outside the poll ranges. So, are white, undecided voters really undecided? That's the question. But they just don't want to tell the pollster, I'm not going to vote for him because he's African-American. That is really the last hope that John McCain has, is that people are lying to pollsters, or that the undecideds are truly not undecided, especially in the states we had in yellow. So, short of that, Obama wins in a moderate landslide electoral college. With that, who knows? It'll be a late night.
Lee, thank you very much. And you didn't miss the introduction now. Lee is a Republican. And all that bad news was brought to you by a Republican who, of course, is being a neutral analyst in this regard. And now we're going to turn to our next speaker, who's associated with the Democratic Party over his career. And he is Bob Dykes, who is principal and CEO of Triad Research Group. And he has participated, I'm delighted to say, in forums like this going back well over a decade. And it's just a pleasure that he is willing to come over to our campus so regularly. In fact, if we went back and counted, I don't think you've missed an election since I started on the faculty here. We're pretty close to it. At any rate, Mr. Dykes is one of the most trusted and respected consultants in Northeast Ohio's market research community. His distinguished reputation in the survey research field extends to both public and private sectors. Bob is quoted often in the media and has frequently appeared on local television and radio programs. With his extensive knowledge of public attitudes and voting patterns, Bob is a popular speaker for business and other civic organizations, whether it's analyzing election results or addressing topics such as the dynamics of issue campaigns and the value of voter targeting. Speaking of issue campaigns, we might talk about gambling at some point. I don't know if you planned that, but someone may be interested in that. Prior to founding Triad, he worked in a research capacity for B.F. Goodrich Corporation, the City of Cleveland, and the Greater Cleveland Growth Association. And you'll be pleased to know that he holds a Bachelor of Science degree from none other than Case Western Reserve University. Welcome.
Thank you. Let me start out by saying something shocking, and that is that Lee Weingart is my friend, and he and I have worked together on a number of significant issues on the same side. And I say that because we live in such a hyper-partisan world. It is assumed that people who have strong views in one direction or the other can't like somebody from the other side, and God knows would never find any time where they could ever work together. But that is actually not true. I think Lee gave you a very good background. The one thing that may not be in the copy of the bio that Alec gave you, for a time earlier in my life, I was also the research director for the Ohio Democratic Party. So I was actually a party apparatchik, if you will. Let me talk about the election in a somewhat different way. There are certain fundamentals of presidential elections that are always the same, regardless. One party is in power, the other party is out of power. The people in America either like the way the country is going or they don't like the way the country is going. If people like the way the country is going, you want to be the candidate of the party in power. If they don't like the country is going, as Lee showed you, you would like to be the candidate of the party out of power. There is no changing those rules. Now, does this mean that Barack Obama must win, or if the country is going in a good direction, or people are happy with the way the country is going, that the incumbent candidate will always win? No. But if you look back historically at what happened, you will find that generally that is true. Certainly people were happy with the way the country was going in 2000, and yet Bush eked out a narrow victory over Al Gore. So there's no determinism operating here. There's, I think, just some very, very common sense kinds of things. So when John McCain started out in this campaign, he knew that things were stacked fairly heavily against him. So in a way, when he sat down with his advisors and they said, well, how are we going to run this campaign? And they said, gee, if we tell people, things are great, they'll say baloney. And if we say we did a good job, keep us in there, they'll say, you got to be kidding me. Or if we said, well, we may not be so good, but they'll be worse. Well, we know that argument doesn't work. So really they had to craft a campaign which tried to take the focus off of what people were concerned about in the country and put it somewhere else. The way some of the talking heads on TV have talked about it, they needed game changers and they needed distractions. And John McCain, I think, really did okay at the beginning. I mean, one of the game changers he clearly went for was Sarah Palin. I mean, she came out of nowhere. Now, the American people love to judge candidates for themselves. They don't like to be told what to think about anybody. When Sarah Palin gave her speech at the convention, people were overwhelmed by her. I mean, she made a great presentation. She was quite attractive in a variety of different ways, and she gave a forceful presentation of her speech. I think shortly thereafter, things began to deteriorate for them, and she has since become a negative factor. But as one Republican consultant said, and I think he is very largely right, she gave John McCain 2 very good weeks. And if you look on, say, Real Clear Politics, and you look at the Obama-McCain trend lines over time, you will find that bump in early September where the red line goes over the blue line. So Sarah Palin, in one way, gave John McCain what he needed. Now, John McCain tried for another game changer. He tried for a game changer. Now, when the bottom fell out of the economy, the distractions and the game changers weren't working anymore. Some of the distractions that John McCain tried were he's a celebrity, which of course ignores the fact that John McCain is a celebrity. I mean, the guy's a war hero. Deservedly, he's a celebrity. Okay, so Barack Obama was just a celebrity. And then when Barack Obama happened to say in one of his speeches something about, that's like putting lipstick on a pig, suddenly that was an attack on Sarah Palin until the news media showed 4 video clips of John McCain saying lipstick on a pig in various settings. But that didn't matter. They were distractions. We weren't talking about health care. We weren't talking about outsourcing jobs. We were talking about the distraction. Then the bottom fell out of the economy, and we weren't talking about distractions anymore. So John McCain went for a second game changer, and this time he came up short. He said he'd suspend his campaign. He would go to Washington. He wasn't going to go to the second debate. It should be postponed. And he was going to stay in Washington until we solved the problem. Well, it turned out that what he meant was that he was suspending his campaign schedule, not his campaign. He did go to Washington. He did not stay until we had a solution. He left. And where did he go? He went to the debate. Now, the measure of how ineffective John McCain was in his attempt to solve this problem is in looking at the Arizona Republican delegation to Congress. How many congressmen from Arizona, how many Republican congressmen from Arizona do you think voted for the first version of the rescue package? 0. John McCain could not convince one congressman from his own state to vote for the rescue package, which I think puts paid to any notion that he had any real impact on that process. So really, where we are in this race, I think, is that the bottom falling out of the economy put the race back where it was at the beginning of the year and has really allowed Barack Obama to campaign on the strengths that I think he brings to this race and is what really is contributing to the lead that he has slowly but steadily built up. Excuse me, I'm not as bad as I was 2 days ago. I wouldn't have been here. Now, Obama faces the same problems that John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Ronald Reagan faced. And what is that? Well, they were relatively unknown nationally when they started. And they were running against two people who had much more experience than they did. Kennedy was running against Nixon. Nixon had served 8 years as vice president. Reagan was running against Carter. Now, people weren't really that happy with Jimmy Carter, but Ronald Reagan was an actor, a former actor. Yeah, he served as governor of California, but he was somewhat bellicose, a little scary. People didn't know what to make of him. The debates changed all those things. When Kennedy debated Nixon, he did not beat Nixon in the debate. He did not need to beat Nixon in the debate. He merely needed to show that he passed a certain threshold, which he did. When Reagan debated Carter, and there was only one debate that year, it was right here in Cleveland, by the way. I happened to be there. I actually saw it in person. Reagan didn't beat Carter, but or maybe he did, but by a very tiny margin, but they were basically even in that debate. But he didn't need to beat Carter. He showed that he wasn't that scary, that he was much more knowledgeable than people thought he was, and that he was basically on a level with Carter. It was after that debate that the polls began to show some margin of victory for Ronald Reagan. What happened with Barack Obama and John McCain? The first debate was on foreign policy. This was supposedly John McCain's strength. The polls showed that of the people who watched the debate, Barack Obama won. Now, interestingly enough, I watched some of the so-called pundits after the first debate. They thought John McCain had won. Now, what was interesting about that was that they know John McCain. And they were watching that from the perspective of people who know these candidates. The American people don't know John McCain any more than they know Barack Obama. I'll come back and talk about that. Or didn't know John McCain any more than they knew Barack Obama at that point. So from the American people, we're watching that from a very different perspective. The second debate was a town hall format. We all know ad nauseum that John McCain wanted to have 10 town hall debates around the country. This was John McCain's format. Barack Obama beat him again. And I will give you just one statistic. The pollsters, in this case, what they did with the second debate, and the others as well, they would call people before the debate. I don't mean just before, I mean like a day or two. And they would say, "Are you going to watch the debate?" People would say, "Yeah." They'd say, "Could I ask you some questions and then call you back again right after the second debate's over? We know it'll be late, but can we call you?" "Yeah, okay." So one of the questions they asked is Barack Obama prepared to be president? Before the second debate, the number was 42. After the second debate, the number was 58. Now, John McCain was higher, but John McCain always had that. That wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't who was higher. The issue was, did enough people believe Barack Obama was prepared to be president? And I think in many ways, the second debate sealed the deal for Barack Obama passing that threshold. Again, the American people like to decide for themselves. They don't want pundits telling you how many years somebody had to serve in the House or the Senate, or how many governorships he had to hold, or ambassadorships, or whatever. They want to see the person on the screen in front of them, and they want to make their own decision. And I think that really is where John McCain has come up short, because Barack Obama in those debates has come off as cool, confident, and able to answer the questions. Whereas John McCain has often appeared, I'll use the word Obama's used, I don't mean it quite perhaps as intensely. He's been he's wandered a little bit, which is a kind of erraticness in the kind of answers he's given in these debates. And if anything, he seemed a little like Al Gore was in the first debate in 2000. If you saw him, a little petulant, a little almost like, why am I on the stage with this guy? I mean, I think Al Gore felt that about George Bush. You know, I have to be up here with him. I know, I've been vice president for 8 years. Who's he? Son of some president, former governor of Texas? Get out of here. You know, and I think in a way John McCain said, look, I'm a war hero. I come from a family of military. We served this country for generations. You know, I've been in the Senate 20-some years. This guy comes along, Johnny come lately. What the heck is he doing here? You know, it's my time. That's the feeling that I got from John McCain. And I think some of the American people picked that same feeling up, which I think contributed to what they think about Obama. Let me talk a little bit about the undecided voters in this election. And let me say that after many years of, let me talk about one thing first, the Bradley effect. I've had the pleasure of working with a number of major African-American figures. The former Mayor Mike White was my last of political candidates, was by choice, was my last major client. I was his pollster for 12 years, did numerous polls for him, including all of his re-election polling. We never saw any Bradley effect here at all. And I've done other black-white polling in the Cleveland area, and it may be that it's simply not here. But all I can tell you is we've never seen a so-called Bradley effect. That said, I believe the undecided voters will, in fact, break strongly for John McCain. And and Lee and Alec won't agree with me, and nobody else will. But it's based upon my personal perspective in terms of the polling I do. One of the things we do is a lot of issue elections. We've done more issue elections than any company's ever done in Ohio. We've done, hundreds. And that's because Ohio votes on everything. This year, for example, if you've seen commercials for issue 147, the Cuyahoga County Public Library, we're doing that one. Or if you lived in the Mayfield School District, we're doing that one. Or if you have any friends in Dayton, tell them to vote for the Dayton School Levy. We're doing that one, just to name three of the major issues. And we were doing the $500 million Solon redevelopment project until the credit crunch took it off the radar screen. So issue elections are something that we do a lot. Now, many years ago, in the first major issue election I ever did, we came down to the very end and we did a poll, and it was 45 to 10. And I said, this was for the Columbus schools. And I said, God, we're within striking distance. We lost 45 to 55. I said to myself, did we screw up? Was the poll wrong? So we went over the poll with a finer tooth comb maybe I've ever done before or since. It was fine. There was nothing wrong with the poll. It's the undecided, basically all voted no. So I watched carefully the next time. And indeed, when we did a tracking survey, not long after, in another issue election, not Columbus schools, again, the undecideds broke heavily no. And I came to realize that there was a different threshold between change and the status quo. In every issue election, one side is the status quo. Things are as they are. If the issue didn't pass, they would go on being as they are. That's the status quo side. It's usually the vote no side. The vote yes posits some kind of change. We're going to make things better. We're going to do this instead of that, whatever it is. And that's the change sign. And the thresholds are much like they are in a criminal trial. In a criminal trial, the threshold for the prosecution is much higher than for the defense. The prosecution must prove the person is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. His status quo is that he's innocent and he remains innocent. So the change side is the prosecution side. We're going to change him from innocent to guilty. So I need to prove to the jury beyond reasonable doubt that this change is warranted. On the other side, the status quo side, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need your suggestions or your alternative theories of the crime or whatever don't even need to have any reality about them if they convince the jury. So these two sides have different thresholds. Well, let's look at Barack Obama and John McCain. I've never noticed this in any other candidate election. Barack Obama has said, in referring to the other presidents, I don't look like them. And indeed he doesn't. And which is a change. And he's talked about his name, which I don't have any problem with. I'm sure Lee doesn't, nobody does. But his name is different. He has a different kind of name. And what is the theme of his campaign? Change. Okay? So everything about Barack Obama personally and about the theme of his campaign says, I'm the change candidate. And what has he said about John McCain? He's 4 more years of George Bush. He's the status quo. So the threshold, if you will, if you apply my perhaps warped logic, the threshold for Barack Obama to convince these remaining undecideds is, in my mind, considerably higher than John McCain's threshold to convince them. So that's the reason I'm concluding that the undecided voters will, to some extent, vote more for John McCain than for Barack Obama. I think maybe it was Lee who was saying this or someone before we started, that it's almost as if Barack Obama has become the incumbent in this election, even though he clearly isn't the incumbent in this election. Let me talk about a couple of more election fundamentals, and then I'll shut up, unless my voice goes out first. And that is, there are two things that are often not equal in campaigns, and that is time and money. Well, we all know where the unequal money is. It's in a very unusual place. Usually it's the Republicans who have more money than the Democrats. And often the Democrats have carped about that. This time around, it's Barack Obama who has a lot more money than John McCain and is trying to use it to his maximum advantage. But to my mind, the biggest missed opportunity of this campaign was that John McCain had the time advantage. And I believe he largely squandered it. Think back. John McCain had knocked out all of his rivals fairly early in the presidential primary cycle. Barack Obama had come down to basically Hillary, but they battled on through Ohio and Texas and North Carolina and Pennsylvania, and I forget all the rest. So there was a period of 2 or 3 months where John McCain basically had free rein to just go beat on Barack Obama mercilessly and define him in a totally negative way. And he did not do that. The other thing, the other missed opportunity, I think, was a misperception on John McCain's part. Someone sent me the most recent NBC Wall Street Journal poll and the other day, and I was looking back, and I noted here that they had the favorable, unfavorable ratings for Obama, McCain, and Hillary, and some other people going back, forever. And I looked back to the beginning of the year, the beginning of the cycle, if you will, their January numbers. And I said, okay, what were Barack Obama's numbers in January of 2008? 49-25. 49 favorable, 29 unfavorable. Now, what were John McCain's numbers? 45, 22. Does that sound like a guy that people knew a lot about? I think John McCain knew. I think John McCain is a genuine American hero, a person who believes deep in his heart that he understands what this country needs to do and that he can, in fact, deliver those things. And I think he knows he's been there for all those years. He knows what he's done. He knows what he's gone through. And I think to some extent, he believes that other people must know that too. But I think if they had looked, if his advisors had thought more carefully about some of the simple data like this, they would have said, people don't know as much about John McCain as we think they know. We need to really tell them more about John McCain in the early course of this campaign and also tell them more about his opponent. But they didn't do that early on in the campaign. The final comment, Alec mentioned issue 6, the casino issue. One of the questions I often get in settings like this is how important are endorsements? My answer is I only saw one candidate election ever in my life that was decided totally by endorsements. Pardon me? I only saw one important candidate issue, a candidate election in my life that was decided based on endorsements. The endorsements were the whole thing. But I think that endorsements do play a role under certain limited circumstances. Let's suppose you have all the endorsements. Well, I think that calls the other side into question. It calls their legitimacy into question. So when the anti-issue 6 people put up an ad that said, every major Ohio newspaper is against issue 6, and then proceeded to give quotes from them, I think that for a certain number of voters anyway, they say, well, if this issue was any good, wouldn't one of these newspapers be in favor of it? So I think when you have all the endorsements, and we've seen Ohio Supreme Court races, where in one case the incumbent had no endorsements. He did not survive. So I think that that does can play a role sometimes. But I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Bob. And I'm just going to say a word or two, and then I want to get to your questions and also get to some brief reports from my students. Let me just put this map up. This is a little bit like Lee's map. We start here. This might work, right? It's a little like Lee's map, and he said what we have to do in looking at this election is start with the 2004 election, and I think that's exactly right. And many of my students who are here today understand that we are in a fairly stable party system as we went through some major transformations in something I call the 25 years realignment over a period from the mid-60s until the late 80s, as other people call it the culture wars realignment, but it certainly reshuffled. The New Deal coalition brought into our politics a lot of cultural issues, abortion, gun control, prayer in the schools, and you know the whole gamut, most recently gay rights and gay marriage. But after this 25 years realignment period, we've had a shakeout of the party system in which a period that I like to call the aftershocks of the 25 years realignment, sort of like the aftershocks of the New Deal realignment. Several people have heard that before in here. And that has taken us to the perfect storm election of 2000, in which we found a very evenly balanced party system, and then we continued on with an evenly balanced party system, and we understand the dynamics in both of those elections. The Iraq War enters into it, and so forth. and Lee has given you a fine overview of the atmospherics leading up to this election and the negative side of it from the Republican perspective. So that leaves us where? Well, I think starting here with the Kerry states, that's 252 electoral votes. You have to put in Iowa. In fact, you didn't even put Iowa in the undecided category. Iowa is, for all intents and purposes now, a blue state in this election. That takes it up to 259. And I think there's no chance in the world that Barack Obama will lose any of those states. So he's got 259 electoral votes. That means he's very close. Any combination of states states would put him there. Colorado and New Mexico, and he's ahead in New Mexico, and he's leading in Colorado. Virginia, with its 13 electoral votes, would do it by itself. And of course, Ohio. Personally, I think Obama is going to carry Ohio. I've been saying that since mid-September, when the polls were closer than they are now, and when, in fact, Obama was back a few points. And I think the reasons are the fact that so many people think the country's on the wrong track, and the economy is number one in their minds, and this state has been hurt very hard by the downturn in the economy, not just this year, but over a number of years. So I don't know, which states are going to fall, what's going to put him over the 270. I've actually suggested to my students that in fact Virginia will be in his column, Ohio, as I've mentioned, New Mexico, Colorado, and Nevada, which would take him to 311. Now, if it's a bigger blowout than that, as you suggested, it could go up into the 360s. On the other hand, I think Bob and Lee referred to the so-called Bradley effect. In Virginia, they call it the Wilder effect. And I haven't studied it intensively, but my feeling goes along with what both speakers here have said, that it is really the undecided voters in the surveys now who are the ones that you will look to if the so-called Bradley effect is there. And then finally, bottom line for me, as my students know, is I'm convinced that Barack Obama will be your next president. It's just too easy to go up those 11 electoral votes with a lot of combinations. But if the Bradley effect is there, and most of those undecided voters do break for McCain, and I think that's a distinct possibility, then I think the margin will be a lot closer to 270 and they're 280, who knows. But I don't think it'll be enough to deny the election, and frankly, I don't think it is going to be a major factor. Now, the best election I like for analogizing this one is the 1960 election. In that election, we had a great deal of anti-Catholic bias. Everyone understood it was a factor. Studies after the election showed that Kennedy probably lost 2 million Protestants who could have been expected to vote Democratic. On the other hand, a lot of Catholics were mobilized to vote who wouldn't have voted otherwise, and it may have somewhat offset that. Most studies seem to think not completely. In fact, the Kennedy insiders said after the election that what surprised them the most was not that they won narrowly, but that they didn't win by a larger margin, given the atmospherics in that election going their way. Well, if this analogy is a good one for this election, we're going to bury another barrier, any kind of understanding that the presidency is barred to African Americans, just like we did in 1960 when we buried the anti-Catholic bias. Okay, well, with that, I would like to just call on a few of my students to make comments about 3 of the key states, or 4 of the key states that we're talking about. We haven't said a whole lot about Missouri, but we have to recognize that Missouri is a state that almost always votes for the winner. And if the election is more on the upper range for Obama, it's likely that it may come into play. But Vignesh, would you say a few words? You can come up here, or you can use that mic right there. Why don't you come up?
Like was shown earlier, Missouri is really a toss-up state. This morning I looked up at Real Clear Politics, which does the average for all the major polling, and Obama's only up by 0.6 points, which is well within the margin of error. So it's a very close race. The two areas that really matter for Obama are the Kansas City metro area and the St. Louis suburban areas. Those are really the two areas that, if he's going to carry, need to be heavily in the Democratic area. Kansas City is traditionally Democratic, but has been trending Republican in recent elections. So he needs to win by a very large margin there. And he needs to carry the St. Louis suburban area, which is traditionally Republican, but is now trending Democratic. And the problem for Obama is that his race kind of goes against him. There's a lot of racial tension in Missouri. In a recent election, there was a lot of issues surrounding busing, and then social issues such as gun control and abortion, and Missouri is heavily Republican in that aspect.
Thank you. Pronounce your last name.
Rubinoff. And that McCain, I think, is going to carry the state, but it's going to end Missouri's bellwether status, I think, which is interesting.
That'll put it equal to Ohio, right? I think Ohio has missed one in the last century.
Just one.
Two?
Roosevelt in 44.
When there was an Ohioan on the ticket. We said a lot about Colorado. Casey Slack is doing a paper on Colorado.
No.
So the thing with Colorado this year is that Colorado does trend Republican and has for a very long time. The only two elections I can think of where a Democrat won the presidential election in Colorado in the post-war era were in 1992 with Bill Clinton and in 1964 with Lyndon Johnson. 92 is even not so much as 64, because in 92, Clinton didn't get more than 50% of the vote. He just got 40-something percent, and the existence of Ross Perot, who really appealed to Colorado voters took away votes from both candidates. Anyway, so one of the things that's very important to this change that we're seeing in Colorado, which has elected a Democratic governor and has elected more Democrats in the past few years, is that the quirky nature of Colorado voters and their desire to be left alone by the government, their sort of libertarianism, if you will, is being a little bit overwhelmed by the social conservatism of the Republican Party. Colorado, as some of you might know, is home to Focus on the Family and a lot of other very conservative religious groups, and more mainstream Coloradans who are Republicans because they want the government to stay away from them are very frightened of that. And I feel that because of that issue and because of Colorado's Proposition 48, which is a fetal personhood amendment, you will get people who are more afraid of the social conservatives than they are afraid of the government becoming too big. So I'm calling Colorado for Obama.
You probably called the election in the process. Thank you, Casey. Ethan, why don't you come up? And David, where are you? David, come on up. I see Ethan's way in the back. David has been studying Pennsylvania, which of course is getting all this attention from the Republicans, despite the polls. And pronounce that last name. Girisama. David, come on.
All right, so I studied Pennsylvania, and it's a very interesting state because it's really the only state in this election where McCain is playing offense. It's the only state that's blue on that map that he's really going after. And obviously both McCain and Palin have visited the state a lot in the last couple of weeks. But there's a number of challenges to McCain. Obviously, the polling that we've already talked about. I looked at the polls this morning. There's been a ton of them done, but in the last 2 weeks, the range was anywhere from, I think, 7 to 14 points Obama ahead. I couldn't find one that was closer than 7. And going back to even the spring, there wasn't a single poll that showed McCain up. There was one that had it as a tie. But so he hasn't led in any polls in Pennsylvania at all. And the other thing is Pennsylvania has party registration, and the Democrats have had a majority for a long time, which the Republicans have occasionally been able to overcome, but it's now 1.2 million more Democrats registered than Republicans. So McCain would have to win either a good number of Democrats or a substantial majority of independents to carry it. And also, there's also a demographic challenge because the suburbs around Philadelphia are the area that's really gaining population. In Pennsylvania, the western half of the state is losing population, and the eastern half is gaining. And a lot of these people are from New York and New Jersey, and are more educated and are younger and trend more Democratic. So I think Obama's probably going to win. Given the time that McCain spent there, he might be able to make it a little closer than some of the polls suggest. I don't think he'll get into double digits, but maybe 7 or 8 points for Obama.
Okay. Thank you, David. Sarah Palin tomorrow is coming to Erie, Pennsylvania, and I would like to go, but my wife's not going to let me. Ethan, where are you? There you go. Ethan is not only studying Virginia, but he's doing an independent study with me in which he's reading a 7-volume biography of Thomas Jefferson.
Virginia's interesting because it hasn't voted Democratic since 1964 when the whole country overwhelmingly voted for LBJ, and it's typically been thought of as solidly Republican, so it hasn't been much of a focus. In this election, however, demographic shifts in Virginia have seen a boom in Hispanic population and in young college age. And Barack Obama has benefited immensely from the mobilization of both of these groups in terms of voter registration, specifically in the eastern and northern parts of the state. And recent polls have seen Obama up. I think the Real Clear Politics average was something like 7.5, and odds makers have it as like a 5-to-1 favorite for Obama to go Democratic this year. And it's kind of interesting because John McCain hasn't been focusing on the state at all, and in fact hasn't even campaigned there until just earlier this month. I think the 18th was the first time he had a stop in Virginia, even though his campaign headquarters are there. And the trend for Obama is really recent too. He didn't overcome McCain until late September, so it's really been recent and pretty dramatic.
Thank you. Let's go to your questions. We've got a microphone here because the recording record your questions. In the back. Do you need to come to the microphone, or Andrew Russell will be mad?
I just can't resist wanting to get your thoughts on the other thing that has been talked about a lot, which is the ground game and the turnout efforts. Because certainly in 2004, there was all this publicity about the Democratic ground game and how they were going to get out all the votes. And in the end, the Republican ground game turned out to be as good as the Democrats, it seems. In 2000, the polls at the end showed Bush with a slight lead in a lot of states, which Gore ended up winning, apparently because the Democrats got out their vote better than the Republicans did, except in Florida. And so there's been a tremendous amount of publicity about the Obama machine, and you can't avoid it. Never mind, you can see it. You can't avoid it in where I live. But what do each of you see about the efforts to turn out the vote? Because it looks to me like the underlying preferences could be within a couple of points once most of the undecideds break for McCain, but Obama might win it on turnout.
Well, there's one thing we really haven't talked about that plays into this question. and that is there's probably been more, if you go on pollster.com, there's been more discussion about polling methods in this election than I think I've seen in a long time. And, well, how does it play into this? Well, pollsters have standard models of the age distribution of voters, okay? And if you got a sample that didn't look like that, you do a little weighting to make it look a little better. Well, what if your age distribution is wrong? What if the age distribution of the people who vote is different this time than it was in the past? Then your poll better look like it's gonna be rather than like it was. But of course it ain't bead yet, so you don't know what those numbers are. So pollsters are doing some guessing. If you look on Real Clerk Politics, for example, you will notice in their polling recap they give two Gallup tracking numbers labeled traditional and expanded. One of the differences is that the expanded sample includes people who only have cell phones, which are an increasing number of people who also predominantly happen to be young. Now, the expanded tracking model has been running about 3 to 4 points more in Obama's favor than the traditional model. Now, Gallup has been around so long they couldn't possibly not do their traditional model, but they're also, mindful of modern reality, so they've given us this new tracking model. So I don't think we really know. I mean, I think the ground games will be there, on both sides. Although I think Obama, certainly, if you listen to the news, McCain has so many offices, Obama has 3 times more. McCain has so many staff, and Obama has 5 times more staff. It's clear that Obama's ground game is going to be better than McCain's. And that could, and I don't know how we pollsters take cell phones, increased enthusiasm by young people, the ground game of the candidates. I think one of the really interesting things to look at when this is all over is which pollsters got it right and which ones didn't. I don't think we know that yet.
Lee?
The whole concept of a ground game has really changed in the last 2 years. It used to be who got their voters out on election day. Ground game, right? Well, when's election day? Is it next Tuesday? Is it today? Was it 2 weeks ago? I mean, the plain dealer said last week that 10% of Ohioans have already voted. I voted on Saturday in my house. So the question is, who is getting the early voters out? I mean, if you go on AIM Instant Messenger, if you look at what pops up, is Barack Obama's face saying vote early. He's got a slot on AIM, which is pretty cool, if you ask me, to get younger voters to turn out to vote. Historically, Republicans have done a better job. They don't brag about their turnout like Democrats do. They just get it done better. They win where they probably shouldn't win. That may not matter anymore. I agree with Bob that Obama will have a better ground game this year, but I think it's not because it's on election day. It's because it started about 2 weeks ago.
Your question.
Yeah, my question is actually related to Professor White's, and it's based on, you showed earlier that there was a much larger turnout of Democrats in the primary season, which is probably closely related to the heated battle between Clinton and Obama. But also, the Democrats haven't held the presidential spot for 8 years, and I think a lot of people might assume that they're a bit hungrier for the win here than the Republicans might be. It's kind of related to, there's also going to be a lot more turnout probably among young people and African Americans. So I was wondering how much you think people's motivation for voting might be and how much that could affect it, because if people say they're going to vote, some are definitely more motivated than others. And also, if somebody's up, you might know this if you're closely watch polls, if somebody's up by a few percent, then how does that affect, like, if you're down by a few percent, does that make people want to vote more because they're down, or that they don't vote because they think they're going to lose anyway? Because I was wondering if Obama people might not vote because they think they're going to win, or McCain voters won't vote because they think they're going to lose.
I've got a very good friend who's a pollster besides Bob Dykes. He's a Republican pollster in the Virginia area. In fact, he's doing McCain's polling, his firm is, Republican Strategy. In fact, they provided some of the graphics in my presentation today. They have, for the past few cycles, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6, asked when they make their polling calls, how likely you're to go vote in November. On a scale of 1 to 10, rate your likelihood of voting. 1 being no way, 10 being for sure. Historically, they've seen them in the 40s range, 45, 48% of people saying, I'm a 10, I'm for sure going to go vote. The last poll they did, 84% were 10s. So that tells me that people are going to vote almost no matter what. If their guy is down or their guy is up, they're going to go vote. So I think we're going to have a record turnout in Cuyahoga County, which is great news for Barack Obama. Record turnout in Ohio, which I'm not sure how that plays quite yet. And record turnout in America. I think Republicans and Democrats and everybody in between is going to come out and vote on November 4th.
This is from the New York Times Wall Street Journal poll. A number of pollsters use the 1 to 10 scale. And this poll was done a few days ago. The number saying 10 certain to vote was 90%. But they asked some other questions, which, if there is any falling off, it will be perhaps to Obama's advantage. They asked about, are you excited to vote for the candidate of your choice? Are you satisfied? Or do you see the candidate as the lesser of two evils? For Obama, 52% said they were excited, 33% said satisfied, 14% said the lesser of two evils. For McCain, 39% said the lesser of two evils. So I think if someone's going to stay home, it's not somebody who's excited or satisfied. It's somebody who sees his candidate as the lesser of two evils.
Next questioner, don't be bashful. And while you're getting up there, I've got to flash up a cartoon. Seems appropriate, given that last question. Go ahead.
I know the evidence of third parties isn't as valid like in this election as it has been in past years, but I was just wondering your thoughts about if in any of the states, if some of the third party candidates may make a difference in any of those states and perhaps steal the vote from any of the major candidates.
Well, I really haven't paid as much attention to that as perhaps I might. I know that on some of the electoral maps that Georgia is not solidly in the McCain column because Bob Barr comes from Georgia. And while I don't think Barack Obama is going to win Georgia, okay, Bob Barr is getting enough votes still to at least put that state in some doubt. I think there could be. I think there could be some oddball states in which these lesser candidates perhaps play a role, not because, but it would only be almost by accident. And the ones that come to my mind are Montana or North Dakota.
I think that's right. My guess is there'll be 1 or 2% would be third-party votes. Perhaps in the western states, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, particularly Nevada and New Mexico, you might see a little trending toward a libertarian like Bob Barr or the Green Party, Ralph Nader. So, I mean, in those states, you've got a pretty wide variety of political views. But I think for the most part, this is not 1992. It's not 1996. These are two major party candidates who will collect the vast majority of the vote.
We probably have time for one or two more questions. Yes, come on up to the microphone.
What do you see any significance to fraud and stealing of the election in any states where one party controls the voting process to the exclusion of the other?
I don't know that it's party control, but I am, as a voter and a resident, very concerned about the state of Ohio and the rules that have been put into place, not requiring you to show any residence of any kind other than truly a park bench, according to a federal judge 2 days ago, as your voting residence. Because you could do a park bench in Bay Village and then a sewer grate in Euclid and someone's backyard in North Royalton. And I don't know what really stops that from happening this close to the election. That voting reform, in my mind, is not the right reform. So I think Ohio was right in the middle of that storm of potential voter fraud, not because of either party, Democrat or Republican, but because of, I think, over-aggressive registration by ACORN and similar groups, and by judges who don't really understand the Constitution and the idea of voting.
I think that, voting is our sacred right, and I certainly agree with Lee that I don't want to see any voter fraud. I think that we have seen zealous officials from both parties operate in ways that I think more reasonable people like he and I would not operate. And I don't look with favor upon either of those. There's a simple way of solving all this, of course, and that is we all have a national ID number, and that stays with you your whole life. And when you register to vote, you can only register to vote in one place and only vote one time. And if you have a piece of ID that has that number on it and your photograph, that's it. But we aren't that kind of country. I mean, so we haven't.
Not yet.
we have a simple way of solving this. Well, I mean, if you look at some of the there are now data companies that sell databases on voters. Okay, I could probably find out what magazines Lee subscribes to, what he buys at the grocery store, probably something about the TV programs he watches. I mean, the amount of information that you can legally obtain about an individual, in terms of data is enormous. Having a simple national ID number would in no way, would not demean someone's privacy nearly as much as it has already been demeaned. It's just that 99.9% of all people don't know that we know all that about them.
Last question? Not hearing one. I may ask one. If you're shy, here's your chance to cut me off.
Well, let me throw one subject out for you and Lee and I. Will this be a realigning election?
I'll answer that. I will answer that quickly. Too soon to tell.
Well, too soon to tell. I know it'll be too soon to tell, and we won't know for perhaps 8 or 16 or however longer years. But what's your guess?
My guess that the issues swirling around right now are not like the classic cross-cutting issues that we've seen in past realignments. But it doesn't mean that over the course of an Obama presidency that potential realigning issues will not arise in the party system restructure.
Well certainly, if Franklin Roosevelt had failed in 1933, that wouldn't have been a realigning election either. I mean, that's why we can't tell whether it'll be a realigning election. For whatever it's worth, my guess is absolutely that this is an election that we're living in a global world. I mean, in a world where old people like myself, this is not the world that I was born into. Okay, and in a way, this is an election about the past against the future. And my wife said this to me. She said, one thing about Obama, is she said the world changes so rapidly. One thing about having a president who's 47 or about that age is that he can relate to the generation older than he is, and he can relate to the generation younger. When you get somebody McCain's age, he's 2 generations away now. The world has changed so much in 2 generations, there's no way he can relate to people 2 generations younger than he is.
Lee, and then Joe.
I'll just quickly say this. If the Democrats get 60 votes in the Senate, a 45-vote majority in the House, and control the presidency, be careful what you wish for, Democrats. We've seen it before. In 1993, overreach. A year later, Republicans got control of the House and Senate and made Bill Clinton's life miserable for the next 6 years.
He couldn't be more right.
So the potential to overreach here, when 54% of Americans say Obama is more liberal than I am, I still might vote for him anyway, the potential to overreach on unionization and offshore drilling and welfare spending is so great for the Democrats when they have no check on their power that 2 years from now or 4 years from now, we may be doing just the other dance.
Joe?
The right answers, I think both Alec and Bob suggested in terms of if it's a realigning election, is it depends on the performance. Right? It depends on whether people look at the performance of an Obama government, if there is an Obama government, and like it. 2 further comments on that. One is there's no such thing as a filibuster-proof majority. Maybe on 1 or 2 issues, but on the really big stuff, like the budget and health care and so on, they ain't going to have a filibuster-proof majority, even if they have 60 Democrats counting Joe Lieberman as a Democrat. But I think the other thing to remember is that while the Democrats think they might have some answers, there's a really good chance the problems are a lot bigger than Obama or anything the Democrats can think of. And so if I had to guess, I'd say it's not a realigning election because I don't really expect this government to succeed.
Well,
one more comment.
Yes. So we don't have to end on that.
Just one more comment. The guy who should be most worried about Barack Obama winning, Democrats controlling the Senate and the House of Washington, lives in Columbus. His name is Ted Strickland.
Well, I think in a way the person ought to be Barack Obama. I mean, I think that Obama has sort of made a mantra about everyone working together. I, in fact, believe that we will not solve these problems if the Democrats do what Lee suggests and try to ram solutions down the Republicans' throat, whether they like it or not. Forget it. That's going back to the Clinton-Bush politics of the 90s and zeros, okay? The only way that this country is going to maintain itself in the future is if we indeed have a new way of working in Washington where we actually try to work with each other and to solve the problems together, whether you like it or not.
My only point is if Columbus can't blame Washington, D.C. for the problems, 2 years from now it could be a different story for the governor's race in Ohio.
Sure.
What we need to do is bring these 2 guys back next fall and look at what's happened after the election. Let me take just a second to thank Bob and Lee and show our appreciation